everybody, my name is Bill Hoy and this is another video presentation of mine. This is Natural Law is the Solution. It's going to be part one. We'll be talking about the addiction problems and the psychological problems we all have. My website is willhoy.com and I got a new camera here, so my other camera is has mechanical problems, and I had to set up a new one. My tech guy set up a new one for me, so my whole setup has been rearranged, so I'm getting used to that. So I just want to do a little, I guess I'll say, preamble to my solution video and just let you know what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about a lot of the cognitive behavioral problems that we suffer from in American society. I'm mainly speaking to Americans, but you can extrapolate this to the world. Wherever you are in the world, you can apply this to your country and your situation. I'm going to be talking about very, very strongly about addiction, obsessive compulsive addiction, which is the norm in American society. It's a humongous problem. Folks, you don't think we have addiction problems? I mean, just referring to drug use, say opiate use. United States makes up 5% of the world's population, yet consumes 80% of the world's prescription opiates. You don't think we got addiction problems? I mean, one year we had 70,000 people die from drug overdoses. I think 75% were opiate overdoses. You don't think you want to talk about a real pandemic? That's a pandemic. But addiction is much more than just drugs, folks. You know, addiction is interpersonal addictions. Addiction is relying on an object outside of ourselves for the ability to cope. And these institutions, like the institution of the idea, the human construct of government, which is human rulership, that's an addiction. The belief in authority, that humans are authority, that concept of authority, meaning a human has the right to rule over another human being, and that the human beings who are the subjects have the moral obligation to obey, is what I mean by authority in that context. That's an addiction. That's relying on an object outside of oneself for the ability to cope, like needing a proxy parent. Proxy is a substitute. And I'm going to talk about a lot of these things here in the first part of my solution video, which there's a better way to live our lives, folks. We don't have to live our lives like this. And once again, I'm just, a little... this is my new setup, so everything's kind of a little disorganized. But I want to make clear that, like I made clear in the second part of the solutions videos and many of my other videos, knowing and understanding natural law, objective morality, and aligning our behaviors to it, aligning our thoughts and behaviors, our feelings, emotions, and intentions, the whole process to this, the whole cognitive behavioral process. Once we're able to do that, and we're able to do that in the aggregate of society, meaning the greater numbers in society, meaning preferably millions of people doing this. Yeah, right. That'll be the day. But what we would get is we would get freedom. That doesn't mean our problems will be over. And this is going to be one of my biggest stressors in my work for as long as I'm able to do this work, whether, I just run out of funding, or whether, the new administration decides to go forward with just completely shutting off all communications other than the communications the power structure approves of, which, once again, folks, as you'll be seeing as you'll hear in Natural Law is the Solution, these videos and much of my other work, the whole left-right thing is just, it's all a construct. It's all a divide and conquer tactic. Doesn't matter which side. It's two wings. It's a dichotomy. It's two wings of the same it's two heads on the same coin. But who knows? They may just go forward with shutting everything down. So we'll see how long I'm in quote unquote hypothetically business. It's sort of a slang term. It's not. I'm not for profit or even accepting donations, but I just want to be free. But just want to keep in mind that it's our cognitive behavioral process that puts us in the problems we're in this world, and it's our addictions. Because we're engaging in obsessive compulsive addictions, that's why we're in this position. People who engage in obsessive compulsive addictions are not a true psychologically mature adult. Children engage in addictions, but for young people, addictions are not necessarily something that's catastrophic. For young people, addictions are just a way to cope and to help them to eventually find their identity and discover their identity. And the addictions with maturity mostly wane. Of course, obsessive compulsive addiction in a child is a very concerning problem, which reflects on the parents. Everything a child does reflects on parenting. But I had something that I wanted to talk about, but I forgot. Once again, this is my first actual video broadcast since I had my technological difficulties fixed, and I'm able to get a camera back. So I guess I'm a little bit disorganized. But this video is going to talk about mainly the problems, and part 2 is going to get to the solutions, which is natural law. And we, as a species, have to begin to understand this. We really do. It's really the only way. And part of understanding this has to be acquiring good knowledge. You might hear that's my oven in the background. I'm baking some French fries. Baking them. How about that, huh? No oil. Raw potatoes. Making them into French fries. I boil them and then I put them on the sheet and I bake them in the oven. So we have to know and understand the human cognitive behavioral process, and we have to get proper knowledge of good knowledge, like true knowledge of our world and true knowledge of natural law. And then we have to align our thoughts. We have to, how can I best say this? We have to be congruent in our feelings, but also our feelings should be based in good, positive, empowering feelings, not feelings of fear and inadequacy. That's where addiction and cognitive dissonance comes from, and all kinds of dissociative states and stuff like that. But we have to have our feelings, our thoughts being based in feelings of empowerment and not feelings of fear and inadequacy, but also aligning the feelings to emotions to intentions process, which the intention is the precursor to the behavior. And then, of course, finishing that off with the aligned behavior. And just that alone, even with the inadequate moral knowledge of your average good intentioned person who thinks they're good and wants good things, peace, prosperity, all that stuff, wants to live their lives and not harm others. People with the good intentions, even if they were just to align their cognitive behavioral process, we could begin to improve this situation. So this is the end of my little preamble, and just looking at time, it's as far as how much time I'm taking. And we'll go to the solution video, and then after the solution video I'll have a conclusion, and then that will be part one, and then part two will really get into the solution and really hit pretty hard as far as what those solutions are. It's not easy. This is not an easy thing. Once again, folks, if we ever were to become a free society, meaning a society that does not interfere with the moral free will choices of the society members, we got a lot of problems to deal with. We got a lot of problems, folks. Our problems don't end with just becoming free. Freedom is the start. Freedom is the start. Freedom, living in a society of freedom, as I formally explained, will give us the opportunity to solve our problems. I've mentioned this before in other videos, but will give us give us the potential to solve these problems without interference of the violence of government and corporate fascism and socialism. So, to the video. I'm sure you're not going to enjoy it. I'm sure you're probably going to hate it, but it is what it is.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? My name is Bill Hoy. I'm an independent researcher. I have been doing a lot of work mainly on natural law and understanding our rights and how that also connects with our life support systems and the sustainability of our environment and natural resources. Let's get started. This is my presentation on natural law, and it's a solution-based presentation, and I'm going to try to further continue to bring everything into a holistic perspective as far as getting people to understand that freedom and our environment, meaning our life support systems, resources, the other terrestrial species around us, everything, the whole nine, are not mutually exclusive. They are interconnected. They are interconnected, interwoven. Can't have one without the other. No freedom, no life support systems. No life support systems, no freedom in this 3D realm. So without further ado, I'm going to start up here. There is a better way to live our lives, folks. There's a better way. There's a better way than all this suffering. It's a better way than all this suffering. People just want to stay in their suffering, man. My own family members just want to stay in their suffering. As long as they have those creature comforts, they'll stay in their psychological suffering, and they're not going to be ready for the suffering that's about to come, because the suffering that's about to come is going to be massive physical suffering as well, and I'm trying to avert that. So there's a better way to live our lives. Understanding and living in accordance with natural law is the answer that will provide freedom and sustainability for ourselves and our children. Let's move on. This is a quote that I like to put in I like to put quotes in, like a lot of people do. We need to be confident that we can cope with, learn from, and enjoy the people and things that make up our environment. Because that wholeness is so hard for us to achieve, addiction is not, as we like to think, an aberration from our way of life. It is our way of life. And that is from the book Love and Addiction. That's by Stanton Peele with Archie Brodsky. And you really want to understand addiction, that's the book. That's a real good book in understanding addiction, because most people think addiction is just drug addiction and stuff like that, alcohol addiction, stuff like that. And addiction is much more rooted in what people think love is. People think that love is what people think love is actually an addiction. People are actually addicted interpersonally, not actually truly loving someone, which really starts with love of self. And it starts with telling people the truth as well. Loving someone means telling them the truth a lot of times. And I don't mean, I don't want to get too deeply into this, but I don't mean necessarily, if somebody has, a lot of zits on their face or something, oh, well, I'm just telling, hey, you got a lot of zits on your face, I'm just telling you the truth. That's not what I mean. I mean, telling them the truth if they're engaging in or in part participating in immoral activities. That's the kind of truth I'm talking about. Okay, so let's just be clear on that. So I really want to make a big point of this. This quote is from the last couple sentences in the chapter of Love and Addiction titled Addicted Society. It's from the chapter Addicted Society. And I can't say it any better myself. Addiction is not, as we like to think, an aberration from our way of life. It is our way of life. Everything we do is addiction. Everything we do in these societies, this industrialized, state-run societies, is addiction. It's all addiction. It's all based on fear. And we need to be confident that we can cope with, can't do it. We can cope with, learn from, and enjoy the people and things that make up our environment. Because that wholeness is so hard for us to achieve. That wholeness, that's what natural law is, folks. It's that wholeness. And we don't achieve that wholeness, folks. The television is not going to give us that wholeness. The mainstream media is not going to give us that wholeness. Just look at this pandemic. This so-called pandemic. This whole pandemic rests on what the television is and the mainstream newspapers are telling people. Because people don't have that wholeness. We don't know how to just go out in our environment and judge our environment for what it is and what our experience is. People need that television to tell them. And then the same with public schools. We get raised in these public schools, and all public school learning is all artificial classroom-based learning. It's not experiential learning, learning in the real world. It's all fake learning. It's all classroom learning, which is not real learning. It's artificial learning. We don't get that wholeness. We don't get that wholeness from experiential learning and judging our world for what it is, based and centered on natural law and true morality. And we don't get that wholeness, and therefore addiction, unfortunately, we think it's an aberration from our way of life, but it is our way of life. And we need to be confident that we can cope with, and I made a little mention of that a minute ago. People can't cope. People can't cope with the pressures that we put on ourselves in this industrialized society by worshiping the state and worshiping this whole idea of the whole industrialized paradigm. And I'm going to talk about this in this presentation. We're going to get into that. And I'm probably going to be regularly throughout this presentation touching on that wholeness, because that's what this is about. This is about wholeness and being able to experience our environment and perceive our environment for what it is and what we're seeing, based on, well, I've said this, but I know I said this, but I'm going to say it again, based on the fundamental principles of natural law. That's the key, folks. That's the key, and I am going to describe that in this presentation. So let's continue. Why do we suffer? Americans suffer from so many psychological and physical ailments. Some of these ailments include addiction and problems coping with life. I mean, addiction's in everything we do, folks. And addiction is everything we do. Almost every involvement out there. And especially what a lot of people think love relationships are. People don't truly love people, they're addicted to them. And problems coping with life come from addiction. And this whole structure that we've set up for ourselves that we participate in. You know, everyone wants to blame the politicians, blame somebody else. No, blame yourself. If you're struggling, take a look in the mirror. It starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with all of us. The suffering we're enduring starts with us, in us as individuals. I mean, you want to talk about a real pandemic? Look at these opiate overdoses and drug overdoses. That's a real pandemic. Look at the amount of people that died under the care of so-called care of the allopathic medical system. I mean, you want to talk about pandemics? Those are pandemics. And you want to talk about a real pandemic? We're going to, a real pandemic is, I would say, willful ignorance and the whole how we all acquiesce to these systems of violence. Those are real pandemics. That's why we suffer. That's why we suffer, folks. So we'll continue here. So, more ailments, suffering from psychological difficulties, such as cognitive dissonance, where people hold two contrasting views. A lot of the meat eating, you have these people that will hug their dog and then go and eat a chicken, and it's like cognitive dissonance. We all suffer from holding contrasting views. Same with the belief in government. We all say we're peaceful and loving people, but then we believe in engaging in violence against people for violating certain codes of behavior that we find distasteful, not necessarily that are immoral, that we find distasteful. We say we're peaceful, loving people, but then we advocate for people who ingest certain substances or have substances on their person or distribute substances to another willing person, preferably an adult. We advocate for them to be kidnapped and thrown in cages or be put under duress, in all kinds of the criminal justice system. So we hold, cognitive dissonance is a big one. You're gonna suffer. You're gonna suffer if you're holding contrasting views and putting your behavior out into the world from those views. Remember, so we think as we act, and as we act and behave, that's what I'm going to talk about later in this presentation, how natural law works. When we behave and put those behaviors into the world, we get the real world results, and natural law is in effect, whether we follow it or not. And then we have Stockholm Syndrome, the whole identifying and making excuses for our oppressors and making excuses for people who engage in violence. Once again, folks, when violence gets engaged against one person, we all suffer. We all suffer, whether it actually happened to you or not. That's another reason why we suffer from so much of these psychological and physical problems that we suffer from. So, also, wow. All right, I have to pause for a second now. I was talking about Stockholm Syndrome, and that's identifying with when people side with and identify with their tormentors and make excuses for their tormentors and people who engage in violence. People make excuses for these politicians. One example would be I did a video trying to inform people, the Trump supporters, to let go of the whole idea that Donald Trump's going to be their savior. I tried to, wake people up, and I was surprised only one person responded like this, but I got a nasty response. Guy was bombing me, but he said, he said Donald Trump's not a politician; he's a businessman, and that's it. That's where it is right there. That's that making excuses for a tormentor, making excuses for an enslaver, which really we all enslave ourselves, but these politicians are facilitators of us enslaving ourselves. And this individual is making an excuse for him, trying to say, no, he's not a politician. He's not a part of all this. He's a businessman. And it's making excuses. It's making excuses and just mental gymnastics in the mind, and not facing the facts that all politics and government is slavery. Period. All politics and government is slavery, and we make excuses for these people. We actually, a lot of Stockholm syndrome I see with this fake pandemic. People who, average citizens, business owners, taking enjoyment in forcing the governor's dictates, taking enjoyment. I was in a store, and I was outside of a store. I wasn't in there, but this guy opened the door, and he didn't even step foot in a store, and she's jumping on him, put your mask on, all this stuff. And I was just like, you could see how enthused she was. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed enforcing the very dictates that are enslaving her and others. Joining forces with her tormentor. Actually, I think the Stockholm syndrome actually came from Patty Hearst with the I forget, the Liberation Army, something Liberation Army. And actually, the quote the quote that was in the book, the quote I read that was from the book Love and Addiction, Dr. Peel talks a lot about that psychological component of how Patty Hearst was groomed to become, to become what she, to do what she did, and by her own parenting, lack thereof. And he covers a lot of that, of what happened there. Dr. Peel and Archie Brodsky cover that. So, and we have dissociative states. This is the scariest stuff. I mean, a lot of this is being experienced by the enforcers of these immoral laws, and the ones who actually engage in the violence. That's the order followers, mainly. I'll talk about, once again, I'm from America. I forgot to mention that, New Jersey. I'll talk about the police. Okay, many of these police actually disassociate themselves from their own actions, to where they'll be engaging in a violent act against somebody, and they won't even be acknowledging it. Sometimes not even cognitively there. I mean, that's how violent of a society we've become. That's what government is. The belief in government is. We're so detached from true morality. that we, the acquiescers, the citizens, make excuses for these people, and these mainly police officers will get into these dissociative states. Larkin Rose's book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, covers a lot of that. How, a policeman will say, don't blame me. I just enforce the laws. I don't make them. That's separating themselves. That's separating and dissociating themselves from their actions. Separating themselves from their actions. So actually what kind of happens is it's almost as if they're saying, if like when a policeman is engaging in violence, trying to kidnap, arrest, or if someone's putting up resistance and actually engaging in physical violence against them, they'll be saying all the while, I'm not doing this to you. Say we're here in New Jersey. Phil Murphy's doing this. He's the governor of New Jersey. Phil Murphy's doing this to you. I'm not doing this to you. But the problem is, Phil Murphy's not here. All I see is you. And they'll dissociate themselves to where they'll actually think it's not me actually engaging in this physical violence against you. It's the politicians. And then, of course, there's the flip side to that, which I've covered in my videos. The whole idea of they'll tell you, well, by not complying, you're doing this to yourself. They'll disassociate themselves from their own actions, their own violence, by blaming you, saying you're doing this to yourself. They'll be engaging in violence. The police will be engaging in violence against you, but telling you all the while, you're doing this to yourself by not complying. And people make excuses for these people and actually honor and cherish these people. And it's the same thing with people in the military. I was in the death cult of the military. I was in that death cult. It's crazy. I mean, the damage to the brain that these dissociative states and these adrenaline rushes do to these order followers is absolutely extensively, the damage is extensive. Not to mention the cognitive dissonance they suffer from, Stockholm syndrome they suffer from, and identifying and making excuses for their oppressors. Then we'll get even into more of the stuff. But these individuals, I mean, I read a study where it said the average age of death of a police officer is 52 years old. I also read in a Pro Police magazine that 80% of all police officers experience suicidal thoughts at one point in time. These people are suffering massively, but don't think I feel sorry for them. You're engaging in violence, and even folks, even your police officers who may do good things on their spare time or do good things in their job, even the ones that don't draw their guns and solve problems by talking and all that. You know what, folks? You're a part of an order following organization. You're a part of a top-down order following organization. Order following period is evil, but you're a part of an organization that works from top down, and I guess the best way to say it is you're a part of, no matter what you do, you're a part of an evil organization, and you need to quit your job. The modern institution of police needs to be eliminated. And folks, I know what I'm asking for. I know, say for one, I've said this before in my videos, if all of a sudden all the police, they're done, there's no more police, I walk out my door, someone blows me away or blows one of my kids away, I'll take it. Really, I will. I know what I'm asking for. I've talked a lot about this in my videos. If you look in my past videos, you'll see I touched on this a lot. So I'm not really going to hammer on that too much in this presentation. Maybe I'll do a more detailed presentation on that. But so you got the dissociative states, Then you got the abandonment issues. We all suffer from massive abandonment issues. Massive abandonment issues. My father suffered from abandonment issues, which then I suffered from abandonment issues. My grandfather, his father, abandoned him emotionally and was also verbally abusive. He was there physically in the house, but he was an alcoholic, and he was verbally abusive and emotionally distant. And my father suffered from abandonment issues. I'll give you an example of abandonment issues. My father used to tell me a story that was one of the highlights of his life. He remembers, he's told me this story several times. One of the highlights of his life was when he was in the death cult of the Navy. I was in the death cult of the Army. He was in the death cult of the Navy. When he was in the death cult of the Navy, he had to ask permission from his superior officer to get married. And he thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Why? Why was he so ecstatic about that? Why would a grown man enjoy having to ask another grown man for permission to get married? Because he never had a father. He always wanted that father to be there and instill some discipline in him and tell him no or tell him yes and stuff like that. He was abandoned by his father. So the death cult of the Navy and these political presidents and all that became his new father figure, became his father. And I suffered from those abandonment issues too. And once again, I don't want to spend too much time on all this stuff because I should really do a whole presentation just on these psychological difficulties. But then you got constant fear and anxiety. Government is based on fear, folks. The belief in government is based on fear. The belief in government is based on, well, human beings are flawed, violent species, so we need to take a certain subset of those human beings, those violent, flawed human beings, and give them power over other human beings. Really makes sense, doesn't it? That's all based on fear. People don't want to be free because everybody's scared of what other people are going to do. Oh no, what are other people going to do? Well, look at what other people are doing now with the belief in government under the legitimized illusion of monopoly on violence. It's all fear. It's all about fear. And the controllers of our world, I've talked about these individuals, the people with knowledge of our human origins and how our minds work and everything, starting with the priest classes in the Vatican, Mecca, and Jerusalem, going down to the royal families, going down to the banking cartels, corporate heads, the politicians and their bloodlines, and going all the way down, going down the line, to the think tanks, to these organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations and all this stuff, and to all these marketing agencies and all this stuff. They all know our human primal fears, which our primal fears are fear of abandonment, fear of darkness. That has a lot to do, ties into a lot with the energy paradigm. Maybe if I remember that, when I get to that, I'll talk about that. And then you got fear of isolation and fear of predators. We see a lot of that with this fake pandemic. Fear of predators. Oh no, nothing worse than an invisible predator, right? A predator you can't even see. Forget about the terrorists. They're old news. I mean, first it was the Soviets, then it was the so-called terrorists. I mean, you look at what the order followers in the U.S. military are doing around the world. I would call that terrorism. But in fact, it is terrorism. I'm not about calling it terrorism. It is terrorism. Period. First thing, not to make excuses for even the so-called terrorists. I guess what you would say ISIS, which is all made and created by Western agencies and all that. But all violence no violence is good. Period. All violence needs to end. Okay, all violence, and I don't mean defensive force. I mean all violence. Okay, all initiating violence against people who are not aggressing towards anybody. So all those primal fears, they all know and understand that, and they manipulate it. With that, and the fear of predators. That's where all this. That's why you have to turn off that television, folks. Turn off that television. Let me tell you something. You want to? I said this before in my video. You want to end the pandemic? Turn off the television. Guarantee the pandemic will end. I guarantee the pandemic will end. You turn off that television. Let me tell you something, folks. I'm living my life. I'm going around in my daily activities. I don't see any pandemic, folks. It's all manufactured. It's all that television and those newspapers and online mainstream sources. And that's not to say, folks, look up bioweapons, level 4 biolabs. Look at the real result of the so-called Spanish flu, more like the Fort Riley, Kansas flu, Rockefeller, Fort Riley, Kansas flu. They have pathogens that could wipe the mat with all of us. So keep that in mind as well. Power structure has access to pathogens that could wipe the mat with all of us. So constant fear and anxiety, the whole work week schedule, the whole 40-hour work week, and then you get your 2 days for your weekend because you're weakened. That green language, that green language. And what do? You got to run around and do everything, and all that anxiety, man. All that anxiety. Oh no, am I going to be able to pay my bills? Look what's going on with this. Once again, I'm going to keep referring to this, folks, because it's absolutely pertinent. We're at 8/23, I think, 2020, August 23rd, 2020. We're right in the middle of this manufactured pandemic, fake pandemic, and the anxiety, our whole society is set up for anxiety. The whole industrialized paradigm is set up for anxiety. The whole working for a paycheck is set up for anxiety. This is all set up, folks, and we comply. Stop blaming the damn corporations. Stop blaming the damn politicians. Blame yourself. We comply with this. We comply with this. We manifest our own reality. And then you got willful ignorance. Folks, let me tell you something. I was trying to be as fair as I could with my family members and just trying to wake them up in soft ways, I guess. Softer ways. Trying to just break down their belief systems and try to get them to kind of see their cognitive dissonance and their Stockholm syndrome and their abandonment issues and all that. And you know what, folks? With all the information that's out there at our fingertips, and with now what's going on with this pandemic, fake pandemic. Once again, I'm not saying there isn't an ailment going around. It's just, I'm saying it's not a pandemic, and it's a plandemic. They planned this. Look up the Rockefeller 2010 document. It describes what's happening almost to the T. Look at the fact that Anthony Fauci predicted in 2017 or 16 that there would be a pandemic, a virus breakout during Trump's presidency. Folks, the answers are right in front of your face. Wake up. But no, because they won't wake up because we got willful ignorance and can't see that something's majorly wrong and that we're headed towards, forget about complete and total annihilation of our life support systems, but I mean, just locally, regionally, and globally. But you can't see that we're headed towards a complete and total totalitarian society, no matter what you want to call it. You want to, call it crony capitalism, national socialism, communism, corporate fascism, cultural Marxism, straight socialism. It's all totalitarianism. It's all government. It's all violence, and that's where we're going. And I'm done with my family members. I'm done with the willful ignorance. You want to be ignorant? I'm trying to keep this presentation nice and calm, trying to do without the cursing. So go screw yourselves. Let me say that. So let's move on. Poor physical health due to terrible diet, stress, lack of physical exercise, polluted environments, and sedentary lifestyles. And folks, I just want to go back to that second one. Those first two I really wanted to cover deeply. Okay? So I did spend a little time on this slide, much more than a little. But those two are the big ones. Those two are the big ones. This is why we suffer. But next, down the line is the poor physical health due to terrible diets, stress, lack of physical exercise, polluted environments, and sedentary lifestyles. And I could do a whole presentation on that. So, and then we got spending our entire lives consumed by false belief systems, the belief in government. It's an illusion, folks. Government is just people. Donald Trump, he's just a man. Hillary Clinton, she's just a woman. Joe Biden, just a man. And whatever this Kamala Harris, I guess her name is, I don't know. But she's just a woman. They're just people, folks. They're just people that go to work in these big castles and all this stuff. It's all a mirage. It's all a facade. The fact that these people have any power is all an illusion. People looking at the Pope like he's a god. He's a person. He's just a person, not a god. Politicians, they're not gods. Folks, enough with this God has ordained this government garbage, Romans 13 crap, Emperor Constantine and the Flavians. Enough with this garbage. No creator would ever bestow more rights to certain people to some people than others. No creator would ever do that because any creative intelligence knows that that's the path to destruction. So, consumed by these false belief systems that only serve to keep us humans in a mental and physical prison, and that's exactly where we are. So, I definitely covered this slide pretty well. I mean, I could talk about all this for 8 hours, but let's move on.
Okay, that concludes the bulk of the first part of the presentation. Natural law is the solution. There's a better way to live our lives, and that's absolutely the truth. We could live in abundance. We don't have to live in scarcity. We could live in abundance. We don't have to live in obsessive compulsive addiction. We don't have to suffer from dissociative states, cognitive dissonance, Stockholm syndrome. We don't have to suffer from these ailments. We don't have to suffer from schizophrenic behavior. I'm not talking about the actual quote-unquote diseases, the metaphorical diseases. I'm just talking about human behaviors and problems in life. And we don't have to suffer from these polarized thinking conditions that we're living under. We could achieve our potential, and we're going to talk about that in part 2. I think we are. Achieving our human potential, which is to have infinite knowledge, good knowledge, not garbage knowledge. And the fundamental key lies inside of each of us individually. This is where this starts. And unfortunately, we're far away from this. And in the next video, next part 2, I'm going to be talking a little bit about these Trump supporters. And these Trump supporters, while once again, where I mentioned the next administration coming in, where today's date is January 15th, 2021. So it's about to become, Trump was I'm from America. Trump was the president of America, and now Biden guy is going to be the president of America. I'm not interested in politics at all, as you sure can understand if you listen to my videos and my podcast presentations. But I do want to just make a point that what this has to do with the way we think. How all these people in the freedom movement fell for the Trump scam. They all fell for it, man. And it just shows how our obsessive compulsive addictions and how our disruptions in our cognitive behavioral process, these just juggling a couple thoughts, but even these people in the freedom movement who knew and understand that government is violence, they'll still cling to this man they thought was going to be their savior. How do you all feel now? We lost 4 years, man. 4 years. But I will talk a little bit about that. I guess right now I don't have much in the tank to talk about these Trump supporters, because I really don't have much word, especially the freedom movement Trump supporters. But for, these Trump supporters who I feel do want the best for our society, and even, there is even some of them who support the left side of the dichotomy, who are, once again, good intentioned people that want the best for humanity. You got to start aligning your cognitive behavioral process, and starting with the knowledge of natural law. That's how it's done. And once again, this is not easy. And once again, even if we were to become a free society, as explained in my introduction, the characteristics of it explained in my introduction, as further explained in the introduction, our problems don't end there. Our problems just begin. Our problems just begin, folks. Folks, these climate engineering programs alone, I've talked about this repeatedly, but I guess I just, I repeat stuff because people obviously don't listen. You don't think so? Take a look out in the world. See how things are going. Just these climate engineering programs, folks. Ending these programs, we very well could have gone too far with our willful ignorance and order followers participating in these climate engineering programs. We could have gone too far. The damage may be too far gone for our planet. Once again, these climate engineering programs are active and ongoing. The whole idea that it's a proposal, it's nonsense. But that's what they say. they meaning the official garbage bag politicians and their media mouthpieces. But we very well could have gone too far just with that. It may be already too late. But that's where what we're going to be talking about in the next video, the responsibilities. The responsibilities that come with true freedom. And those responsibilities are working to maintain what our priorities as humans are, which is the continuation of freedom, meaning moral free will choice, not inhibiting moral free will choice, and the maintenance of our life support systems, our environment. The life support systems that enable us to live on this planet. Nothing comes before that. Not health, safety, or life. That's what the responsibilities are. I'm going to get to that in part 2. Nothing comes before freedom in our life support systems. Health does not come before that, folks. Whether only a couple people are dying from a virus, I mean, once again, the whole establishment theories on how viruses, bacteria, and all non-communicable diseases, communicable diseases, work are, full of anomalies, contradictions, assumptions, extrapolations, and outright dogma, rigid dogma. Not about real science, not about observation and discovery, not about building on new discoveries. It's about special interests, making money of one main reason. And nothing comes before freedom. That's what I'm going to be talking about in the responsibilities. Nothing comes before freedom in our life support systems. And this is the solution. So you heard most of the problems as far as addiction itself and psychological distress, cognitive behavioral disconnections. And now you're going to be hearing about the solution, and I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison of human law to natural law and show how natural law is rooted in truth and actual factual mathematics and universal principles, whereas human law is based in violence solely. It's violence. That's what human laws are. Do this or else. That's all human laws are. Natural laws, the natural law of objective morality has observable and discoverable components to it where you can actually see it working in the world. As more people become immoral and don't understand natural law, which is what we have, society becomes more enslaved. Take a look at our society. Mask laws, soon to be vaccine laws. I mean, not laws, mask orders, but soon to be laws and vaccine laws once again. Folks, they're talking about this in different state legislatures, folks, about mandatory vaccinations and forcibly removing people from their homes, all that kind of stuff. Here in the United States, land of the free? I don't think so. Home of the brave? I don't think so. So, that was the end of part 1, and we're going to go to part 2. And if you could check out part 2 and get the solution. And it's not going to be, probably not going to be a solution you like, but unfortunately it's a solution. That's all.